Hey, do you guys remember a long time ago how I made a video about the brand new Ampeg Rocket Bass amps? And I basically said that you should hold off on buying one because they were a brand new, untested product from a company that doesn't exactly have a stellar reputation for QA and reliability. And they'd just been acquired by Yamaha, so it was a good idea to just wait and see before you bought one. You remember that? Well, I got one a few months ago, so let's talk about it. About how I came into possession of this. I actually found this for sale used locally from a guy who had bought it brand new, and he'd actually bought it really, really cheap from wherever he'd gotten it from because it did not work out of the box brand new, which is exactly the kind of shit that I was worried about. But anyway, this guy bought it and he was able to fix it because once he had torn it apart, he found that there was one wire that was disconnected. So he just plugged it back in and then the amp worked. Like, I think that is score one Andrew, score zero Ampeg, right? Like, I was right. I was 100% right. And this guy is not the only one to have noted those kinds of issues. You can go on TalkBass and find a bunch of examples of other people with similar kinds of things. And don't worry, Ampeg's gonna score some points back later because as it turns out, this amp is actually quite good and I really like it. But if you happen to buy one of these, just do it from a place that has a good return policy and definitely get the warranty on it. I think I like the light better here, actually. So let's actually compare the feature set of this amp to the Fender Rumble 500 because that is the amp that it's directly competing against, and it's one that I used for quite a while, so I have pretty extensive experience with it. That is until it got stolen out of my car. So unfortunately, we can't do some like direct back and forth, tone comparisons. But the bottom line is that they both sound great. So if you're torn between the two, you really can't go wrong. Now, if you're looking at that progress bar across the bottom and thinking, ain't nobody got time for that, I'll give you the too long didn't watch right here. The Ampeg Rocket Bass amp has a bit more attitude and a way better sounding overdrive, but it is a bit bigger and heavier, and it definitely makes a difference when you're lugging it around in my experience. Oh, did you want some more detail? Alrighty then. On the control panel, you get a 3-band EQ to the Fender Rumble's 4-band EQ. And while that might sound like a bit of a downgrade, the truth is that most of the time I'm actually just running this totally flat with minor adjustments depending on the room I'm in, but I don't find that I miss that extra EQ band at all. If you do want to push the EQ a little bit, it gives you a lot of range and it sounds really good until you get to like the very end of it where it starts to get a bit much and a little bit harsh. But yeah, otherwise I find that this EQ section sounds really good. Gimmicky character switches, the Ampeg also has gimmicky switches in their ultra high and ultra low. And in practice, I never use these things, but if you like them on Ampeg's other amps, then you will like them here. the ultra low boosts and cuts at the same frequency levels that the knobs control, 40 Hertz and 500 Hertz. So technically you can get the exact same mid-scoop effect with the knobs and not even worry about the switch, which kind of makes it feel a bit redundant. However, the ultra-high boosts at 8 kilohertz, where the treble knob controls 4 kilohertz. So in that sense, it does give you something extra that the EQ section doesn't. And actually, that might only be relevant on the 210 like I've got here, because it's the only one in the lineup that's got a horn that you can switch on and off. Now, some people have noted that the horn on this is a bit noisy, but I don't feel like it's any more or less noisy than any other horn I've ever heard. Plus, you can switch it off if you don't like it, and I don't think that it's much of a factor once you get going anyway, and it's in a band mix or you're just playing. Continuing left, like I hope America does, we find a single volume knob. Now the Rumbles have a separate input gain and master volume, and I find that I much prefer this setup. You do get 2 input jacks in case you want to like reduce the amount of gain going into it. I find that I can just plug into the passive one all the time, even with my active basses, and then just turn the volume down as needed. Worth noting is that you can actually use both input jacks at the same time. So if you are in a situation where like you're teaching or something and you want to have both of them going at the same time, you can. Anyway, I do like the single volume knob. That's just simpler and easier to use, and I rarely go above halfway even when I'm gigging. This thing is loud AF. Here's a little pro tip. If you're having problems hearing yourself, get your amp up off the floor or even just tilt it back. That way the sound waves are hitting you in your melon and you just hear yourself way better. This is honestly a great thing to do at home too. I find that putting it up like this when I'm playing, it just sounds so much better than having it on the floor because you can just hear it better. Next we have the SGT thing or whatever they call it, and I find that I like it way better than the Rumble's overdrive. There are actually a couple of ways to use the overdrive circuit. With both knobs all the way down, you can use it like a mute switch. So if you're like me and you don't really use the overdrive circuit, you can still get use out of it, which is pretty neat. With the grit still all the way down and you know, putting the level back up to where it needs to be, you can get like a really pleasant on all the time sort of overdrive sound, which is kind of uncommon on solid state amps. Or you can use this second channel as just like a clean boost, which is kind of neat. Now going up from there, I find that I like every position below about noon. It breaks up in a really nice way, and I think it could very well replace an overdrive pedal if you needed it to. It starts to get pretty gnarly, and if you max it out, you get a full-on fuzz. Now I haven't used the SGT Circuit much because I don't have the foot switch for it, and I'm not likely to like walk back to my amp to turn it on when I need to, but I do feel that this overdrive is a hell of a lot more useful than the Rumble's overdrive. I just don't think that one ever sounded very good. Looking around back, let's talk about the jacks here, starting with the extension speaker output. Now this is only an option on the 210 and the 115, but it does allow you to get an absolutely massive sound. Now I haven't found this to be necessary at all because it's loud by itself, but I do recognize that there are players out there who are going to feel some severe FOMO when they realize that this is only 250 watts by itself and you only get the full 500 when you hook up an extension cabinet. Now on the flip side of this amp also sounds great at low volumes, so if you're an apartment dweller like me, you can play without angering your neighbors, or you can plug in headphones. This mutes the speaker output, but not the DI. So if you want to use this tip to record silently, you can just plug something, it doesn't even have to be headphones, into that phone's jack, and then still use the DI without the amp making sound. We've also got an effects loop back here, which in my opinion is the most useless standard feature that they keep putting on bass amps, but for the 1% of you who actually use it, it's there if you need it. On the opposite spectrum of usefulness, we have the DI out, which is what you've been hearing for all of these sound clips. people complain that I don't mic up the amp, and let me just assure you that the sound that you're getting out of the DI here for these samples is a great representation of the character of the amp, right? Really all you're missing out on doing it this way is like room ambiance, which I don't think matters all that much. Like, I assure you, the sounds that you've been hearing are a great representation of the character of the amp and exactly what you're gonna get out of it if you buy it and take it home and actually hear it in person. Now, some of Ampeg's DIs have a reputation for being a bit noisy, like particularly on the SVTs, and I will say that this one isn't dead silent either, but it's not noticeable enough to be an issue. Certainly once you get playing or like you're in a band mix, like the horn, it's not gonna be that big of a deal. Any of my videos before, you know that there is many things that I care about, because caring only about the sound kind of misses the whole point of a review, and putting your opinions behind a paywall is kind of stupid. Not that I'm calling anyone out in particular, but damn, imagine. But what do I think about the Ampeg Rocket Bass 210? I think it's great. It certainly sounds awesome, has a really flexible and dynamic EQ section, an overdrive that doesn't suck, and it's a pretty attractive looking black rectangle. Couple of small criticisms here though. In my original video, I noted the size and weight difference as compared to the Fender Rumble 500, and I'm definitely noticing the extra weight and size when I'm carrying it around. Like, I'm only 5'8", and so when I'm carrying it normally at my side, it's very close to dragging the ground because it is just a little bit taller than the Rumble is. And in situations where I've had to carry it very far, you definitely feel that extra, 5-ish pounds or so. Now, in the grand scheme of things, it's still a very lightweight amp at about 40 pounds, but I do think it could benefit from a bit better handle or maybe even some wheels on it. I've seen that done on combos, and I wish that'd be a more standard feature. Another thing that I don't like is how the master volume affects the output of the DI. It was the same thing on the Rumble, and I didn't like it there either. I really wish that it had an independent volume control, or maybe even just like a set output out of the DI, so that if I make adjustments to my amp on stage, it's not gonna affect front of house. Like, that should be a standard feature for something like this that people are definitely going to be actually gigging with. But overall, I'm gonna give this amp 4 out of 5 rutabagas. Go ahead and push the buttons if you want, or don't, I don't even care anymore.